Candid Leader Insights, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of customer success with industry leaders. I'm your host, Irina Cismas, and today I'm joined by Kasia Laugenie, Customer Success Director at Jacquard, a company helping global brands use generative AI to create on brand messaging at scale. Kasia, I'm really happy to have you here. Thanks for joining.
Absolute pleasure. Good to be here. Thank you, Irina.
Let's start from the very beginning. How did you first get into customer success? And how do you think that start shaped the way you lead today?
Great question. So I've originally come from a marketing background and I straight away joined the technology space. And from there, at first, started my journey in SaaS MarTech in sales. But I very quickly realized I much liked the post-sales journey. So within 6 months or 15 years ago, I started my journey straight away into account management. I think when I first started account management, customer success was not really a term that was very heavily used in the UK. It was, I think, predominantly grown in the US at the time. So I started my journey in account management, which was the full 360 renewals and customer success. And I think I knew that was the career for me because you get a little bit of best of both worlds being on the agency side. You work with on the tech side. You get to work with a lot of brands, so you feel part of the extension of their team, but you also work on a technology, which is what I've always enjoyed. And from there on, over the years, I went into kind of key accounts and pretty much been in customer success for the last 15 years or so, with the last 3 years in leadership here at Jacquard. And how I lead today, based on kind of my experience so far, because I've always been in this space, I'm a very strong believer that people buy from people and we should be strategic advisors. So I think it's a very heavy, like a human role, which I really enjoy. I am very strong in ensuring that there are very strong relationships built with customers, because everything else, especially now, can be obviously fixed with technology that we can support the teams and any of the admin. But I still believe that kind of human contact is very important in what we do.
I can totally relate to your story. And even if, and to be honest, being on the marketing side of things, I've always been working with the agency model. And I totally appreciate the account management and the whole support and the whole implication. So I know what you mean when you say that this human connection counts a lot. And yeah, indeed, people buy from people. And yeah, it's the foundation of everything that we are building on. I'm curious, how is to find out more about the Jacquard organization and how does the CS function looks like now?
Yeah, we're a relatively small function. We're a team of 5 globally. On this side of the pond, and we have some team on the US side of the business, and we are very much pure play custom success, also very high touch. So we do operate in a very kind of hands-on model that does pretty much from the onboarding analytics into the reporting, all the training, servicing. So we do act somewhat, I would say, a little bit closer to how agencies manage customers, because our product can be quite kind of hands-on in how we support our customers. We do have predominantly seniors in our team, and that is down to probably the caliber of customers we work with. So we work with predominantly enterprise brands and quite large, complex organizations that require quite a lot of experience to manage. And also within that org, we have somebody who specializes in onboarding, and that person does a hybrid role from onboarding and also looks after some customers. And to us, that was a very important role kind of to start with, to have somebody who specializes and evolves that process for us, because I'm a big believer that the success starts from the starting point of being with the company. Like, how do you measure success? Your experience at the beginning then determines very much the success of the customer. So now we've established a lot of those processes. That person also manages accounts. But all in all, we are a very high touch function, very hands on, not that many accounts per head. And so I guess that's the overview.
You mentioned onboarding and yours and the success part. And I'm curious, why do you have them separate? Why do you have them separate under the same umbrella? Because the models that were other companies that I've talked to have one person who basically has an overview of the whole customer journey. I'm curious what made you separate them into two separate teams.
Yeah, very good question. So they necessarily how it's set up at the moment is that we have a specialist so it helped us to really document all of our processes for onboard. We have pretty much done the full 360. We have started with customer success, doing the onboarding, and then managing customers, if you like. And when we got somebody who specializes, that this was an internal person who went into that role in onboarding, the decision we made was because we very quickly realized that our product success and customer success with us really weighs very heavily on them having the right start, using our product in the right way. And you get the most engagement at the beginning of your relationship. Then you sometimes will get later because you cut businesses go into business as usual. So we found that first 6 months so crucial. And we needed to revamp some of our processes, give it a lot of attention to make sure as we grow the business and get many more customers, we have that process really nailed down. But that's not to say we still have CS pairing up from the get-go with that person. So the handover is very smooth. And as the business grows, we'll probably still, now with established processes, CS will probably continue to do probably some onboardings of their customers as well. But we have managed to establish some good processes because we found that really important.
Speaking about the processes, do you also have a process between sales to CS handover? And how does this look like? Because I know that it's not necessarily pain point, but let's call it inflection point when the transition happens. I'm curious, how did you manage to sort it out?
Yeah. And I can imagine this is a pain point that has never been solved in kind of this type of world. And it will really depend on how well that process goes or not. We have in our setup, we work very closely with account executives. So our sales internally sell the business. So they bring the new business in, but they stay on the accounts.
Okay.
So the one benefit we had, whoever sold the business will then stay on as an account executive and will support the customer success leads in the QBRs and in the renewal. So it does then favor the sales because they can't just hand it off, right? So they need to know they'll stay on with the account, so it has to be right. In terms of the processes, we also have sales engineers. And sales engineers are probably ones that are tasked the most at ensuring everything is kept in check and documented. So we have actually recently been revamping our process, which has a scoping document that is led by the sales engineers who keep the salesperson in check, make sure we get all the information, but also very early on, we get involved from an onboarding perspective to make sure we have all the information. So don't be wrong, doesn't always go absolutely perfectly to plan, which is the nature of it. But we have created a template that these are the must-have items that unless we have this scope properly pre-sales, it will be difficult to make it a success. And that's adhered to. But I agree, it's a very difficult topic at all times. I think because we have a very documented process, I like to think we do pretty good job at that. But that's not to say customers do sometimes. Our sales cycles can be quite long. So sometimes from scoping to signing, some of the scope might have changed. But those kind of things you can't really avoid.
And once you have this, okay, the transition between the teams, you also need to somehow make sure that the processes are where you need a calibration check. You need some data to basically tells you that what you've built and what you've put in place is actually working on. And I know that you will redesign some customer frameworks and the help scoring. I'm curious, how did you end up doing those? And when did you know that it's time to tweak some of the things?
Yes, and I think so. Our health scoring for customers has gone on the journey. We had originally had a very kind of simplistic way of doing it.
Can you tell me what does it mean simplistic? Because in some cases, simplistic is best than where it's better than nothing.
Yeah, and I think that is what happened to us. We started simple and then we went really complex and we've simplified that process again because we've realized there were too many variables we were trying to track and they weren't enough. So I think the key aspects for us is, as you heard me talk at the beginning, is the relationship. So is the relationship and the alignment of the customer. So how strong is the relation you have with your top stakeholders, with your champion? Do you really understand the buying cycle of your champion? So one is the true relationships, and two, you have to find a point of data that you can't argue with. You'll get subjective opinions of the health of an account from CS or a sales perspective. Some people get happy ears. You need to find a data point that you can't argue with it with. And if you have a platform or a product that is measurable, so such as adoption, usage, or kind of performance, performance marketing, so we can measure the performance of the tool. I think you have to find metrics, for me, are very important. That is, what's the usage and what's the performance of the tool. And from there are things that we have identified 2 or 3 items, such as are we fully integrated into the customer's workflow? Yes, no, because we know the more we integrate it into the customer's workflow, the more successful those customers are. And I guess some of the kind of primary metrics are probably there, and there's a couple that are very directly related to our product, but I think adoption, which you can't argue with, to the relationship and the status. So I think that's probably the key buckets, because otherwise you can overcomplicate it.
I can second that we are usually, and it's not only on CS, it's also on the marketing side of things. We want to have so many data points until the data points no longer tell a story, and you don't know what that data tells you. Basically, I also go through the same loop, start simple, and then with all the slice and dice of the data, then it's too complicated, then throw everything away. Let's go back to the simple things and then build complexity step by step. Going back to the frameworks, and I know that one of the pain points that the CS teams usually have is the way they connect what they do to revenue outcomes. Because usually a lot of things end up on the CS plate, and it's very easy to get very busy and overwhelmed. And in the end, it's okay, but how did that impact the revenue? So how is this in your case?
Yeah. So I think for us, the biggest metric is the adoption of the product and understanding the value that is delivered to the customer. And that then very much informs us of A, the revenue, any revenue risks we might have, or B, the upsell opportunities or renew opportunities to grow that account. Because if we have a very good attribution, we know exactly the value it's delivering and the adoption is at 100%. From that, if we know we're in 50% of the pie from what the customers could do with us, that should be, in theory, a very clear signal of upselling that account. And this is where I talk about kind of the metrics that are measurable, because once the customer's got very clear attribution and a very good adoption, you can work with that. And similarly, on the metrics that we tie to any kind of revenue risks, and similarly from the adoption front, if we know the adoption is for any product, we would then try to figure out as quickly as we can from the get-go to understand what risk that could pose. So I think from revenue outcomes, we have the adoption piece and the stakeholder piece that we try to weigh up what the actions we should take and that life cycle.
How do you identify the value your product has, the product, the team, to the customer?
Yes.
With that.
Yeah, so it's a very good question. And then we're in a very lucky position in terms of the space in which we are in, because we are in performance marketing. And the bottom line of what the product can deliver is an increase in campaign performance.
Mm-hmm.
What a team needs to spend a lot of time focusing is to understand if our tool increases the performance of their campaigns by X, what does that mean to the business? And this is where it comes to, you need to really use your good people skills and stakeholder relationship to understand, like, what does that actually mean? How does that mean to you hitting your business goals? How does that mean you hitting your team goals? How does that hit your KPIs? Our product is very measurable. We're in a very lucky position there, but it's that measure. The biggest part of our job, I think, is the most important to understand. What does that actually mean? Is that good, bad, or indifferent to the business? Because sometimes you may see, oh, our product is completely outperforming and the way above the averages we see, but you have to know if that's good for the customer. So I think going back to your question about attribution, we do have a clear attribution, but the biggest thing is, what does that actually mean rather than making an assumption?
And do you usually discover this value? So first, let me ask you: do you have the situation where your product delivers different type of values to different type of stakeholders under the same account?
Yes. Yes. And I think a lot of that comes also from experience and understanding how that measures. In the space in which we're in, obviously within kind of AI, and customers not only look for, our product not only delivers kind of revenue or an increase in their campaign performance, but also creates efficiencies in content production. And that is, you speak to any C-suite at the moment, there are massive mandates like, how do we use AI for efficiency gains in a business? So there will be certain types of stakeholders that you could also deliver that value in addition to, from an efficiency perspective, and translate that into kind of better workflows rather than just campaign revenue, which is usually the target of the immediate teams we work with, but the CFO might care about an additional metrics such as how much do we make business more operate much more efficiently.
That's super interesting. Did you also observe, because you are data driven and you have the numbers, and plus you also have the stakeholder management component here as well. Do you see that usually the accounts with multiple stakeholders that receive different type of values are more likely to renew and stay with you rather than the ones where you only have maybe one champion or one use case, one value? Do you do those type of correlation?
Yes. Yes, I think that's one of the biggest parts of the job, is making sure that you are multi-threaded. So one of the parts of my job that I try to do with team on accounts is I try to also connect with different types of stakeholders in business. The AE would vary, so the sales executive, they would usually go after a different stakeholder. But we do it as a nature of any business. In SaaS, you will sometimes be with just one champion, but I do think that poses a big threat sometimes, because if that person moves on, then you will get a new person who might have a different agenda. But if you then find additional two stakeholders in that business that also really understand the value, they can vouch for that success and what that means to the business. So I think one of the biggest parts of the job in CS to make sure you have a minimum of 3, 4, however, it also depends on the size of the business you're working with. They really understand the value.
Let's go back to the team, because none of the things that you taught us and you shared would have been possible without the team behind this. And you mentioned that, okay, you are managing a team of 5 and they are distributed globally. And I think that where it's not easy to manage Europe, North America, different time zones. How's the team dynamic, and how do you plan the capacity? How do you make sure that the team spirit is there and you avoid burnout in all this setup?
Yes. I think for a global team, we're in so all our team in the US is East Coast, so we still get a good 5 hours of an overlap between us. We do have majority of our team is very senior experience. They have been in the business for a long time, and then they pretty much, they're quite self-sufficient in kind of in the ways of working. Where I come into play is probably just trying to understand where I can remove any blockers, or just check in on the team or bounce kind of some ideas. And I think you just need to be really strict in kind of the boundaries that you create. And I think we have a quite good dynamic with the team. So we don't, one of the things I don't like to do is do a meeting for the sake of a meeting. If you can send an email, do a Slack, do it. If it can be done in 2 sentences on a write up, don't put a half an hour meeting. Because I think the nature and sometimes what we can do is 80% of our time should be spent with customers rather than on a ton of internal meetings. And I think as long as you're very strict in doing that, I think you can handle it. And I think the team are very also aware of the different time zones that we have here for like times of calls spent. But don't get me wrong, like here and there you would have to stretch that's okay. And interesting about talking about burnout, I actually went to a women in customer success meetup last night, and there was a presentation on pretty much burnout and kind of technology and kind of women, how we work. And one of the things that kind of talks about this is making sure you allow the team the time to work around their calendars. So something like making sure if you like to run and you want to start a half an hour later, no one's ever going to be micromanaging you. You might take a shorter lunch, or you might finish a bit earlier, start earlier, to make sure you do those things to avoid the burnout, and you give yourself the space to do the things that make you better overall if you take a little bit of time to also look after yourself. So I think it's just treating each other like adults. But don't get me wrong, there will be time of year that things get stressful. Like for us, is this time of year, especially around peak, because we work with a lot of retail. So obviously Black Friday, holidays is always a very busy period with our customers. But I think it just needs to be mindful of kind of boundaries.
We talked about processes, we talked about teams. I want to address another thing that it's a repeated thing in customer success, scaling and do more with less. And I think it's the department where we ask where everything ends up on customer success. It's very easy to not respect the boundaries of what falls into what team. And I want to ask you, how do you handle the scaling part? What helps you? And basically, what are your not necessarily the things that you do that helps you keep the quality and consistency while you grow?
Yeah, good question. And I think the nature of kind of any growing kind of business customers, the nature of customer success, you can never finish the job. There's always more you could be doing, and that kind of list is growing. I think it's having the tools and to know what to prioritize and when. So similarly as we scale, as we get more customers, before we can add any headcount, as you say, we need to be very mindful of like how we assign new accounts. I let the team decide who takes on which account majority of the time based on not just their book of business, but they will have a better knowledge of how much time their customers require right now. They'll know of any new projects going on. I will work with the team to understand where the new accounts go before we add any headcount. So that's on the capacity planning front. And two is technology. Like being obviously a business in AI is like how I'm currently in a project of like, how do we as a team better use AI to make ourselves more efficient? And one of the things that takes us a ton of time at the moment that shouldn't is our reporting and how we prepare QBRs for businesses, for our customers. So something I'm looking at the moment, working closely with other teams in the business, is how do we challenge ourselves to automate this process? Because the solution isn't always to add a headcount. Then you've not challenged yourself and making things better. You've just fixed the problem by adding more kind of headcount, which isn't a solution. So we're currently trying to challenge ourselves in reporting, trying to challenge ourselves in things like note takers. How do we use better note takers? How do we best use, so we have a kind of tool internally that helps us summarize notes and kind of be more efficient on that. I think is, to answer your question, is to like work very closely with the team on capacity, and rather than say you're going to take on this account or this more work. And likewise, also to keep people excited, is also give them the opportunity to be involved in projects and creating new processes. Because as you say, you can get so busy with your day-to-day job, it can become a bit like daunting. There is a lot So having a project they'll be excited about is always a great thing to do. And three, I think, is that technology front and challenging our processes. Be like, you can always do things differently if they take too long. So it's like, how do we do that? If something works, how do we roll it out for everybody else to take advantage of the rest of the business?
Super. Now, I wanna find out, how do you manage to prove the value of the team internally? Because you mentioned that, okay, the value that we're understanding the value that you guys contribute to the customers is very important, and I can only assume that it's also important to basically for the team that you are managing to prove that value internally. And I'm curious more of, how do you basically tell the story internally of what your team does, and how do you use the numbers, the data to basically promote internally the team that you are managing?
Very good question. And I think this is very challenging to do without really micromanaging and over reporting on everything that you do. It can be quite difficult to do because predominantly what I'm responsible for is our GRR, so the renewal pound for pound. And essentially that's the bottom line metric that we care about as a business. You need to tell the story and really expose the business of the activity that's happening within the team. And likewise, that I think we kind of figure out actually how to even do better is, how do you escalate the information that we get from customers further out to the business? And I think that's the biggest actually thing that we're trying to work on at the moment is we're trying to match the engineer with a customer success lead to work in post to actually start sharing more information. Because I think as a knowledge center, customer success has the most knowledge about what customers are saying. And I think you can really deliver the business to the business that value. And two, obviously from a GRR perspective, I report on that. And one of what we have done recently, which was over years, the most useful exercise we have done is we have done an external survey handled by somebody who had interviewed a lot of our customers as we're planning next year, our roadmap. And some of the questions were asked, not just about the space, but also about our customer success team. And it was phenomenal to get non-biased results from customers, what kind of a job we do, what we could do better. And the consensus was very much that we provide a very good kind of customer service to our customers, that we understand the value it brings to the business. So I think and we haven't done NPS in the past too much of it, and we haven't surveyed our customers. And I think having that data was probably the most single valuable data point for us to say to the business, this is what our customer said. It was a bias kind of interview piece that we've done. And I think that really helped us elevate like the job that customer success does, in addition to your kind of standard kind of GRR metrics, meetings with customers and sharing the knowledge with the wider business that can help with kind of the roadmap and the product development.
I love how intentional you are about connecting data, people, strategy, and it really ties everything together. Looking back, what's one leadership lesson you wish you'd learned earlier?
Progress, not action.
And if someone's building their first CS team right now, what's the one thing you'd tell them to focus on?
Consistent reporting to the business and stick with them. In terms of metrics, I think as teams, this was the trends of, we can do so much. You could do so much. If you try to do too much, you're not going to do enough of it. So I think if you're trying to build a CS team, decide what is the one or two things that really matter to the business. If we improved, I don't know, GRR, churn, growth, satisfaction, adoption, what are the two key things as metrics that you can measure? Define how you're going to measure them, and then go from there. Don't try to do too many things at the same time, because you will try to do too much and you won't know that what you've done has or hasn't worked because you're doing too many things at the same time. So I think looking back, probably as the growth, you probably want to stick to a couple of metrics and over time really see how they perform, of course, in addition to your classic Jira and Era, whatever the team started it on.
Kasia, this was such a great conversation. I really love how you connect structure, data, leadership processes in a super practical way. Thanks again for joining and for sharing your story with us.
Absolute pleasure. Good to be here. Thank you very much, Irina.
To everyone listening, thanks for tuning in. And until next time, keep mastering customer success.